Today we're going to talk about science. We're going to talk about what science is and what science isn't. And we're going to talk about scientism, which is a religious belief in anything published in a scientific journal. And we're going to try to talk about how that all relates to the carnivore diet and how you can interpret all of this information, because it can be a little bit overwhelming. Hi, I'm Dr. Rick Godding. I'm a practicing orthopedic surgeon, and I am transforming my life, my health, and my practice using the carnivore diet and the principles of metabolic health, with the foundation being ketogenic principles. So I wanted to give a little bit of my background. So when I go along and I'm trying to interpret all of these different scientific articles that I read or that I hear other people interpret on LDL cholesterol or any of the other very major topics, protein synthesis, protein breakdown, all of these articles can get very overwhelming, even for me. And I have a degree in biochemistry, so I have a hard science. So there's like soft sciences, and then there's hard sciences. Soft sciences are biology and earth sciences and things like that. And hard sciences are chemistry, physics, biochemistry. And when you say soft versus hard, they really are just harder. There's just a lot more math involved. There's engineering is a hard science. Sociology is a soft science. So anyway, I have a degree in this in undergraduate, and then I went on to medical school. And in the summers, I worked at the Cancer Research Laboratory at Georgetown, and I did bench science. I helped with articles that were published. I did a lot of, like every other medical student, a lot of reading of scientific articles from the beginning of medical school up until now. I read a couple scientific articles on rotator cuff repairs and new ways to treat them yesterday. And so as a physician who is called upon as part of his profession and has a long training of science, I look at the way all these things come across interestingly, okay, and maybe different to somebody, and I can see how somebody who is just trying to get along and trying to figure out what to eat can get a little bit overwhelmed, because I get overwhelmed. And listen, I'm not a lipidologist, so if I read an article about LDL cholesterol, I don't have the same viewpoint on it as a cardiologist or a lipidologist or even a trained biochemist or physiologist. So I thought it was important to try to help people understand how all of this works. First of all, we'll talk about the notion that science is some sort of perfect entity that just spews out truth and is untainted by normal human fallacies and faults. It's just not true. If you look at a lot of published research about published research, so people do research on the research, you'll find some striking things. There have been multiple different articles published over the years about how articles that are scientific studies are never published. Up to like 40% of scientific studies that are done, and even with people, are never published. Now, they made a new rule about this in 2007, and they were supposed to, the FDA was saying, hey, if you are doing the experiment, you have to publish, otherwise we fine you and all these other things. But they did a follow-up study in 2017 and showed that still up to 40% of research that is done is not published. Now, you have to think that a lot of the research that's not published is not looking good for the people who funded the research. And let me tell you, there's big funders of research. It's the government and it's big pharma when we're talking about the type of research that I'm talking about, which is basically the stuff we're talking about today. Like, how does LDL cholesterol affect my arteries, right? That's all funded by somebody, either the government or big pharma. And you have to wonder how many of those studies on a new drug, let's say, weren't published because they didn't show something favorable. And then there's also another interesting set of articles that was published. The most recent was published in the very prestigious journal Nature in 2016, and it was about the reproducibility of scientific studies. In other words, the ability of a study that was done to be done by another set of investigators is sometimes in some of the data that up to 60% to 70% of studies that are attempted to be reproduced by another set of investigators are not able to be reproduced. In other words, we did this experiment, we published it, nobody else can make it happen using the exact same parameters. Now, even further, 40 to 50%, depending on where you read, of studies are not reproducible in the very labs that publish them. So I say this not to say that scientific studies aren't worth reading. I mean, I read them. I was very interested to see a study on LDL cholesterol which showed there's a U shape. In other words, very low and very high cholesterol can be damaging, but somewhere in the middle, I believe it was around 180, is really good for you. Okay, well, there's a study now that says that. Question is, would another lab be able to reproduce that study and get those results? And it just becomes overwhelming, because you can listen to a cardiologist on one YouTube channel who says high LDL will kill you, it will clog your arteries every time. That's all the science says. There's nothing different in the research that stands up to the test of scrutiny. And then you'll have a heart surgeon, on the other hand, or another cardiologist say it's totally overblown. It's not LDL that causes the problem. LDL is necessary but not sufficient. So how do you even try to make sense of it all? And I think that you have to be skeptical at all times. I am super skeptical of both of those positions, that LDL means nothing and that LDL means everything. I think it means something in between. Now, the way I interpret this is this is what I think people should do, this idea of the n equals 1 experiment. I mean, we're all n equals 1 experiments. N is the number. In other words, if you publish a scientific study, the number in the experiment is n. So if there's 10,000 people, it's n equals 10,000. So we're all our own n equals 1 experiments. And we all have to try to figure out, we have to correct for all of the information that people don't know about us as individuals. I'm just going to share with you how I interpret my approach to this. And I'm using LDL cholesterol because that's the big one, right? That's the one. I'm betting my life on being right about LDL cholesterol. I mean, if my LDL cholesterol is high, and it's pretty high, right now I'm betting my life that it's not the most important thing. But at the same time, this is a short-term bet. I'm not going to keep that bet on the table forever. I am going to do other investigations. So my family history is positive for my father, who had the widowmaker lesion, which is a 90% or better blockage of the left anterior descending artery, which is the main artery supplying blood to the heart. He didn't know anything about it until he was recovering from another surgery and had a heart attack, even though he had been scanned before. So I have real skin in this game, and I'm just telling you how I approach it scientifically as I can. And again, scientism is the religious belief in all things scientific. But the funny part is scientism is still undergirded by ideologic belief, because there's differing research. So you have to pick one set of research that you're just going to wholeheartedly believe in if you're going to be scientismist. So my own personal medical history drives my approach to how I interpret all of these things. I know that I have a real potential to die of a heart attack. Okay, and I also know what my coronary artery calcium score is, and I have had 2 years ago, had a coronary angiogram. At my 1 year carniversary in January, I'm going to have another coronary artery calcium score, and I may get another coronary angiogram at that time. I probably will. I'm going to get all my labs followed up, and I'm just going to try to determine for myself, with all my risk factors, what do I do here? If my LDL is 350 after I lose another 20 pounds and I've been on the carnivore for another 6 months, and my coronary artery calcium score has bumped up a little bit, I'm not going to ignore that and say, oh, no statins for me, no sir. I may not go to a statin. I may go to adding carbohydrates as a method of reducing LDL cholesterol, which I think was brilliantly demonstrated by Nick Norwitz in his N of 1 Oreo cookie experiment, where he dropped his LDL cholesterol more by eating 10 Oreo cookies a day than he did using a statin. So there's things out there, but right now I'm just in the learning and experimenting phase. So I think it's important for all of us to not get bogged down with people who are absolutely sure one way or the other on big questions of science. You got to believe something. But you don't have to be a zealot. You don't have to be to the point where people have a belief and it becomes an ideological driven belief, and absolute 100% proof contrary to what they believe is totally discarded because they're so emotionally and psychologically attached to those beliefs. So this is my approach to science. This is my approach to the science that is being published and talked about all over the internet and all these YouTube channels. And I find them very helpful, and I listen to them, and I go back and read the studies. And I try to apply scientific rigor to those studies, where we were taught in medical school and residency how to evaluate a study and the things to look for to see if the study has a certain level of validity to it. But I know it can be overwhelming. And my N of 1 experiment has proven one thing so far, 100%. I've said this before on my channel. In a 54-year-old orthopedic surgeon named Rick Godding, 7 months now, coming up on 8 months of the carnivore diet, has improved all of my markers of metabolic health, has gotten me out of being qualified for metabolic syndrome, has dropped me 49 pounds, and has made me feel like I'm 35 again. So anybody who is out there on the internet saying the carnivore diet is nonsense and it's no good, I just tune them out, because I'm proved to myself that that's not the case. Now, does that mean that the carnivore diet is the best way to long-term health because it's had that 6-month effect on me or 7-month effect on me? I don't know. I'm still plodding through that. But I don't want to get caught too far in the other side of it, which is carnivore diet is the only thing you ever need to do, and nobody ever needs to eat plants and all of this stuff. And I've already given my opinion previously. Trying to determine an ancestral diet is nonsense, because even today, well, what's the human diet? So, well, where do you live? What's your socioeconomic status? I mean, a person of low socioeconomic status in Zimbabwe versus someone of high socioeconomic status in New York City eat a very different diet. Okay, and you just multiply that by the number of different places there are in the world. So it's impossible to say what our ancestors ate. It's just a nonsense proposition altogether. Because you can't tell me what people eat right now, right? It's totally different. So it's nonsensical to me. So there's a lot of people try to make a thing out of it. Oh, ancestral, but it doesn't make sense logically, because what's the modern diet? My modern diet's different than my neighbor's. I just eat meat. So, I think that ancestrally people ate what was abundant and easy to eat to keep them from starving. And I think most of our ancestors certainly were hunters until agriculture came in. But that doesn't mean that, if somebody in Guatemala in the days of the Mayans, like they're walking through the forest and they see some berries, they're like, no, just meat for me, thanks. You see some bananas or some mangoes or whatever there was back then. Heck no, they were going to eat it. So anyway, so that's kind of my opinion. It's my opinion on science and how I apply science to my carnivore journey. And I hope it made a little bit of sense. I hope you get a little bit of something out of it, because I know it can be overwhelming. I can only imagine if I didn't have all the background that I did, and I'm trying to plow through this and wonder who believe. Do I believe this person over here who says, LDL is the devil, or this person over here that says that I want my LDL to be in the multiple hundreds and I think that we need it? But you got to find some people that you trust and try to glean from them what you can. If you can find a good doctor who's open-minded, snag onto that doctor. Hang on to him. And otherwise, just try to apply common sense and keep tabs on things. Check things. Because if your numbers get too crazy, think about the long-term implications of them. And because this is a long-term game, right? This is our health. This is a long-term game we're playing. So just a little Dr. Rick's opinion on science and how it applies to the carnivore diet. Hope you liked it. Please subscribe. Break out in the comments, please. I'd love to hear what people think about this. I really would love to hear what people think about this, and people's own opinions and people's own experiences with having such a giant amount of information that is sometimes absolutely contradictory from what appear to be credible sources. How does somebody without any scientific background approach it? Please, join in the comments. And please like and subscribe, and I'll be back with something else.